people who are known as the senators, and they're extremely wealthy, and amongst them they decided who would rule the Roman Empire. But in about 56 BC, okay, there was a guy called Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a general. Sorry. Julius Caesar was a general, and he was sent to the north of Europe to sort of conquer more lands, but he went far and beyond what he was supposed to be doing. So 56 BC, he's going all around Europe without permission of the Roman government. He was going to other countries, to other lands, and he was taking over and conquering and creating new territory. Now this wasn't all bad for the areas that were conquered, because the good thing about the Romans is they had developed extensive technology. So important was they were able to provide fresh water for cities, which is very important. They were also good with lighting, with heating, with education, and with building. These were things that they spread throughout Europe. But this guy, Julius Caesar, he decided, the people in Rome, the government, they called him back to Rome and said, "What are you doing? You've been going out and conquering these lands without our permission." He said, "Well, I don't really care if you give me permission or not, because in fact what I'm going to do right now is take over the whole of the Roman Empire." And he actually seized power. So what was going on in Rome almost a bit over 2,000 years ago was the world's first semi-democracy. It was only the rich people, but they got to decide amongst themselves who would be the ruler. But then this guy Julius Caesar comes along and goes, "You know what, I'm going to take power for myself." He had a bit of a big ego, not just because he was going and conquering all these lands, but he was also conquering several ladies. Cleopatra, you may have heard it from, in Egypt. Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, they were getting down with each other. So he obviously thought that he was pretty good. He seized power, but the Roman senators, they didn't like this, and someone actually murdered him on the steps of the Senate there in Rome. The Roman Empire then fell into civil war, and out of that you finally had a ruler come, and from that period on, for the rest of the Roman Empire, you actually had like a dictator, a supreme leader. So no longer was it this semi-democracy, you had a supreme leader. And as I mentioned, very strong, very powerful, very influential, the Roman Empire. It extended deep into northern Europe, it extended south into northern Africa, and it extended all the way over into the United Kingdom, into England. But you remember watching Braveheart? Right, how brave the Scottish were. The Roman Empire never made it into Scotland. There's actually a wall that is built across the country, a stone wall, and that would mark the end of the Roman Empire. Now, about 1600 years ago, what happened was the Roman Empire came to an end. They still had a lot of technology, they were developing very well, but there was a lot of infighting and things started to collapse. One of the things they blamed for the collapse of the Roman Empire was that in the city of Rome, they had a water system, so you could turn on a tap and get water, but that water was carried by lead pipes. So they suspect that lead poisoning was actually a big thing that occurred, and that led to the downfall of the Roman Empire. But when the Roman Empire did collapse, okay, Europe had started really developing. You know, as I mentioned, they had technology, education. But what happened was, with the decline of the Roman Empire, all that was lost. Okay, the whole of Europe went into anarchy. No longer was technology being developed. In fact, it was diminishing, and it was a time of about 600 years of social decline. The only person that was able to even create an empire was Charlemagne, the guy from France, the big guy with the long flowing hair that could jump on the horse that I told you about. And but what happened was, about 700 years ago, in a city near here called Florence, where we're going tomorrow morning, there was a very rich family called the Medicis, and they had got rich because they created the modern banking system. So they were the first rich bankers in the world. And because they had all this money, what they wanted to do in Italy, when you have money, is you make your city and you make your own homes beautiful. So they invested money in architecture, in art, and in different styles of art. But to do that, they need to pay for different people to do this. And so that's where people like Michelangelo came along. And people like Michelangelo, he decided he's got this money to do this artwork, to design these buildings, And he realizes that the way to do it, because at the moment they're in Europe, they didn't have much technology, but he looked back to the Roman Empire and how grand and how fantastic it was, and he decided to focus on that. So the Renaissance was like the rebirth of the Roman Empire, of the rebirth of technology, of artists, and things like this. And it was a way of fusing what they were using then, scientific discoveries and mathematics. They would fuse this with art to create new things like 3D pictures. So for a change, they're painting now in three-dimensional. This was a big change. Before that, things were completely askew. They didn't look realistic to what was actually being painted in front of them. So artwork started to change. People like Leonardo da Vinci came along. So he was an inventor, he was a philosopher, he was a mathematician. These people, they could absolutely do everything. But the thing about the Renaissance that occurred in just this little city of Florence is that it spread throughout Europe. And what that did was it gave more people influence to do more. So society was influenced all around the Western world, and they would influence more people, and therefore you had a continuing snowball effect where more and more technology started being created, more and more artwork started created, and more different styles started to be created. And this has continued up until this day. So the fact that Western culture has all these different styles of artwork is because of what happened in the Renaissance 700 years ago. What happened in the little city of Florence has influenced the rest of the world to create all these artistic styles. So the fact that this morning I played about 6 or 7 different genres of music is because of directly what happened back here 700 years ago. Isn't that exciting? But as for Italy, eventually what happened at this time, Florence was not Italy. Italy was not in existence. Italy didn't come about until the 1860s. Italy before then was a bunch of city-states. So Florence was its own country, Venice was its own country. But in the 1860s, they got together and formed Italy. They thought this would be good for them. Unfortunately, it wasn't that great. They never had very stable governments.
Oh, dear.
Pardon me. Until World War I. After World War I, a guy called Mussolini came to power. Mussolini, you may have heard of the term fascism.
Yep.
Fascism, fascists, like the Nazis. They were fascists. Extreme right wing is what you call it. Communism is what they call the extreme left wing. Fascism, Zongle, hands up for communism. So communism on the left, fascism on the right, and fascism was about tight control of government, about a few small people, or in particular one person, ruling a country with a very tight knit, with very sort of fewer freedoms, so they can control the government, so that would be better for everyone, okay? And so he was the person who coined the term fascism, and he was, at the time in the world, you had capitalism in the centre with democracy, you had communism, which had only just occurred, the first communist revolution in Russia, and you had fascism. So these were 3 very different ideals that were 80 years ago very prominent in Europe. And this is really what World War II was fought over, because Mussolini influenced a guy called Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler he created the German fascist empire, he created the Nazi party, and eventually, of course, this led to World War II. Unfortunately for Mussolini, is that fascism didn't win. I guess communism and democracy and capitalism are the ones who defeated it. Yeah. But so at the end of World War II, Mussolini was defeated, and in fact it was his own people, because he had a very heavy-handed government. He did a lot of sort of bad things to his own people, and it was they who eventually they actually strung him up at like a gas station, and so people could actually go past and view his dead body. It was quite brutal. But since then, Italy has become, like I said, one of the strongest economies in the world, and whilst they're very relaxed and sort of lazy, the cities are extremely beautiful, and the food is very good. Very good. When we go to Pisa this afternoon, it's going to be very hot, and one thing you have to try is gelati, the ice cream. Gelati and pizza. And pasta. And cheese. And the local beer is Peroni as well, if you're looking for it. It's a very good local beer. But now, given the fact that we've entered a new country, I'm not going to shut up. Sorry, I'm not going to shut up. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to win a small bottle of wine and a block of chocolate.